Good Tuesday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and this is the Jerry and Jerry Show. Thank you kindly for joining us. We are live in downtown Charlottesville on the I Love CVille Network, a show, the Jerry and Jerry Show, today presented by Stable Craft Brewing. One of the best brewing outfits in the Commonwealth, guys, is in Waynesboro. Locally owned and operated brewery, Stable Craft Brewery. I cannot wait to highlight all the fantastic events and all the offerings this brewery has to offer you, the craft beer aficionado. Judah Wickhauer is our director and producer. We give him some props. I would love to highlight and welcome the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer, our star of the show, Jerry Hootie Ratcliffe. Let's get him on camera. Hootie, Stable Craft is part of the team, my friend.
You know, I had not really heard much about those guys until they jumped on board, and looking through their material yesterday that they sent us with Mark Glickman. He and Mark and I go way back. Incredible marketing man for sure. It's been everywhere, all over the country and outside the country. But like you said, the offerings that Stablecraft has blew me away. I had no idea that not only do they have all kinds of great drinks, ale and I guess cider and soda. I think I even saw wine in there, but gourmet meals. You can stay there. They have accommodations, luxurious. It looked like to me just a complete package. I mean, gosh, if you're looking for a staycation, or if you're outside the area and coming into Charlottesville for a weekend, it seems like to me that'd be a place I'd want to check out.
Very well said, Hootie Ratcliffe. Stable Craft Brewery, guys, a Virginia farm brewery specializing in craft beers and ciders with a farm fresh menu in an agri-pub style brewery restaurant. Welcome to the family, guys. Judah Wickhauer, we'll go to our first headline. Hootie, 42 unanswered points. The Wahoos jump out to a 14-0 lead. As you said in our pre-production meeting, you know, this is a ball game going into the fourth quarter. Why don't we start perhaps with a little bit of positive here? We saw more moxie and chutzpah from the first-year signal caller, Anthony Calandria. A nationally televised ball game on ESPNU, a game that was tight until the final period. But let's cut to the chase. Still 42 unanswered points. Where do you want to begin, my friend?
Yeah, I'll begin with the incredibly awful traffic in D.C., which I've known about for years because I covered the Redskins for 16 years. But my son and I drove up to the game. It took us 4 hours to get from Charlottesville to College Park because of the traffic on 66 and the Beltway. I was late to the game. By the time I entered the stadium, Virginia had taken a 7-0 lead. I was able to see it on their massive jumbotron that they had from while I was waiting to get my credentials. And I was somewhat stunned that Virginia jumped to an early lead. And once I got into the press box and watched them drive right down the field and take a 14-0 lead, I was even more stunned because Maryland, as we know, was a 14.5-point favorite. So for Virginia to jump on them that early was somewhat surprising for sure. And I'll give a lot of credit to Anthony Calandria for that. He was making some really nice passes. They used a little trickeration there to catch the Terps off track, and they were able to make a game of it for quite a long time until the true freshmen really showed up and tried to force some issues and made some freshman mistakes. But the fact that, Jerry, that they've been in the game for the last 2 weeks going into the fourth quarter, I would think gives you some promise, some hope that maybe at some point they might be able to finish one of these games off. We don't know if it's a lack of depth, a lack of experience, not knowing how to win, lack of execution, or a combination, I think, probably of all of that above, that's preventing them from finishing the job. But instead, they've been imploding in the fourth quarter, and I think they've been outscored something like 57-3 or something in the fourth quarter of the last 2 weeks. So
21-0 against Maryland.
yeah, and 14-0. Well, I guess it's 42, maybe 42-3. But yeah, JMU was 14-0, I believe, in the fourth quarter. So, well, I know it was. So they've got some. They got to figure out some way to try to finish these games.
Calandria, let's cut to the chase. The kid's got moxie. The kid understands the concept of spreading the football around the field. You had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different pass catchers for the Wahoos against the Terrapins. I got the box score here in front of me. You know, when you're the quarterback, you're going to get the good, you're going to get the bad. Turnovers. Turnovers impacted this ball game, and he'll be the first to admit this. It starts with him protecting the football under center, Hootie.
Yeah, it's part of the maturation of a young quarterback. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to force some issues, and I'm sure he'd like to have some of those passes back. I think a lot of it is the kid's just trying too hard. He's trying to put the team on his back and make something happen, and sometimes doesn't use the best judgment. When they were about to tie the game, they were down in the red zone, and he threw to the end zone, and had they completed the pass, they would have tied the game at 21-all, which would have been somewhat unbelievable. Instead, he made a bad choice. He probably should have thrown the ball out of bounds or just kept the ball and settled for a field goal. Instead, he tried to force a pass into a tight window and got intercepted in the end zone. Terrapins drove 80 yards and scored, swung the momentum completely. His next 2 passes in a row were also interceptions, and Maryland scored on one of them was deep in Virginia's territory, I think around the 30. The other one was around midfield. So he gave Maryland short fields both times. They capitalized, reeled off 21 straight points, 42 unanswered points from the first quarter on. And that was it. That was a game, set, match. But the kid played his butt off. I mean,
he really did.
The Maryland coach, Mike Loxley, who's coached some pretty good quarterbacks,
he's got a great quarterback.
And he compared him to a young Tagovailoa, and talked about. He said this kid is dangerous because he can extend plays with his legs. He's not afraid. He's got a good arm. He throws it deep, and it was driving Loxley a little crazy. He said he was a little loud over his headset with his defensive coordinator at times because Calandria was so effective throwing the football.
Guys, you can ask Hootie Ratcliffe, the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer, some questions. You can share some comments. Put them in the social media channels you're watching the show upon. We're literally live on all social media literally right now. Twitter, jump in the mix, especially Hootie Ratcliffe's followers. Offer some questions, offer some perspective. Johnny Ornalis, the owner of Guadalajara, and El Mariachi sharing the show. We love you, Johnny Ornalis. We really very much appreciate your support. Brennan, Armstrong, Robert and I, the NC State Wolfpack, trot into Charlottesville. Yesterday, and I'll look at the updated line here in a matter of moments, Hootie, but as of yesterday, the Wolfpack were a 9.5-point favorite. The over-under was 45 and change. We'll get to this contest. Before we do, I want you to highlight 3 pros and 3 points of concern for this Maryland-Virginia outing. What we learned from this contest.
Yeah, sure. Well, one of them was Calandria that, we just discussed. Even though he's played well and he's ranked number 66 in the nation in passing yards, not bad for a true freshman with no experience, not highly recruited. But he may be on the bench come Friday night against NC State because Tony Muskett, who we thought would start last week, still had some soreness in his shoulder, couldn't play, or could have played in an emergency situation again, but they felt it was a smart decision not to push the issue, make sure he's totally healthy before he returns. So, again, if he's healthy, he will probably almost certainly start against NC State.
Does that shock you?
It doesn't, because of what we discussed last week, and that Elliott and Kitchings both believe that you don't lose your job because of an injury, starting job. However, if you look around the country, even Nick Saban last week switched quarterbacks 3 times during the Alabama game against South Florida because he wasn't satisfied with how any of them were playing. And so I expect that perhaps if Muskett starts slow or can't move the team, that we'll see Calandria at some point, if not early, then at some point. And he may try to play both of them anyway. We don't know that. We'll maybe find out a little bit more this afternoon at
press conference.
At Elliott's press conference. But that was one step forward, I think. Another was the offensive line, the fact that they switched 2 players. They moved Ty Furnish, the starting center, to right guard, and moved Brian Stevens, the right guard, to center. Seemed to work out fairly well. They had been having a lot of problems the first 2 games in low snaps, back to Calandria and to Muskett from center, from Furnish, and they didn't have any of those against Maryland, if I recall. So that they called that a win, that they were not putting the quarterback under even further duress than what he would be. Calandria was sacked 4 times again, so that they've given up 12 sacks in 3 games, which is not very good. But that might be one step forward. They're still waiting on Jimmy Christ to get healthy, the transfer from Penn State, who would probably be moving in there at right tackle, which would give them a little more depth on the offensive line. But any improvement upon the offensive line is a positive step for this football team. I guess another is that they're playing a lot of freshmen, trying to develop some depth. I think they played 9 freshmen against Maryland, and it's not something totally unusual to do. I know Bronco did that a few times, played that many freshmen, if not more. So they're trying to develop some depth to where maybe that when teams are rolling in fresh bodies against them in the fourth quarter, that they'll be a little more fresh, particularly on the defensive side of the football. I think that's where at least 5 of those guys, or 6 of those guys played, were on defense, including Cam Robinson, the sensational freshman out of Essex. He was a 4-star, picked Virginia over Florida State. So that's another positive, I think. So a few positives coming out of that game, and the fact that they were just able to hang on and take the game into the fourth quarter. That's something a lot of people really didn't think was going to happen. A couple of negative aspects.
We go special teams. I mean, we talked about this in pre-production. Special teams maybe not so special so far.
Yeah, I mean, one of the worst things they could have done was after they took that 14-0 lead and had the momentum going their way, they just let it slip away. They kicked the ball off a little short of the goal line, which I'm sure that something Elliott wanted the ball into the end zone so there wouldn't be a return. The Maryland kid took it 98 yards to the house, and it was 14-7, just like that. You can't do things like that. There's no excuse to give up a 98-yard kickoff return. That's an incredible boost to the other team, especially after you just scored and took somewhat control of the game. Virginia is number 127 in the country in kickoff return defense and number 128 in the country in punt return defense, having given up a touchdown to JMU on a punt return last week, another momentum swing. So that's something that they've got to nail down. You just can't do that. You just can't win games giving up stuff like that, especially when you've got other things going wrong, giving up sacks, tackles for loss, giving up big plays on defense. And that slide just into the other negative is that the defense is currently ranked 120 in the country in total defense, giving up 450 yards plus a game.
What happened to this defense, Hootie? Going into the season, we thought the defense was going to be a strength. Everyone thought the defense was going to be a strength.
Yeah.
A boatload of starters returning.
Yeah, eight starters returning just from the Virginia team, plus Malcolm Green and Sam Westfall from Clemson and SMU, the two corners, who started some in those programs. So there's a lot of starting experience on that defense, and it's hard to explain. I mean, I know some of it goes back to the offense putting them in some precarious situations in field position, but still, last year, a lot of that happened, and they bent and didn't break. They only allowed 24 points per game last year. This year, they're and the fact that they're not getting any turnovers either. They're number 123 in the countries in takeaways. So they haven't had a single interception in 3 games and only have 1 fumble recovery. So that's one thing. They're not putting any pressure on the opposing quarterbacks either, which is something that I know that Chris Slade made a point of emphasis in training camp. He expected his guys, just the outside linebackers, defensive ends, to rack up 25 to 30 sacks this year. So far, that's just not happening. They're not getting to the other team's quarterbacks, and that's taking a toll because the other quarterback is having a lot of time to pick them apart.
Having a field day, and we saw that with Maryland. The Terrapin Gunslinger, 19 of 30, 342 through the air, a touchdown, and a very concerning 11.4 average per completion. We have Brennan Armstrong. We have NC State, national television, Friday evening, Scott Stadium. This is going to be a big football game for the Wolfpack. NC State, we're still trying to figure out what kind of talent is on this roster. Yes, they're 2-1 on the season. We can make a legitimate argument. You got to win against UConn. You got to win against VMI. And then Notre Dame, 45-24 loss for this Wolfpack football team. We'll ask Hootie Ratcliffe, the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer, who is NC State, what they stand for, and what we can expect on Friday night. But if you could, dot the I's and cross the T's for the fan base with Northern Virginia, Waynesboro, Harrisonburg, Lynchburg, McLean, Danville, Richmond, Williamsburg, Hampton Roads, Athens, Georgia, the Outer Banks, some folks outside Nashville, and Allentown, Pennsylvania, right now all over our viewership heat map.
Well, thank you guys for viewing in, for one thing. We appreciate your support and your viewership. But, NC State, they're a team that I felt like would be somewhere around the middle of the pack this year, no pun intended, but Armstrong he's still kind of a mystery in some aspects. He had that great year here 3 years ago, didn't do anything last year. He's not exactly off to a flying start this year. He had 3 interceptions against Notre Dame. He only has about 25 more passing yards in 3 games than Calandria does in 2 games in terms of national rank in passing yards. So he struggled a bit. There's been some talk about him maybe losing his starting job. I don't know. I haven't got an update. We'll actually be on a Zoom with Armstrong later this afternoon, so we'll get some opinions from him on coming back to Charlottesville. and playing against a lot of guys I'm sure he's still close to. Some of the Virginia players were asked, I guess after the Maryland game, if they still are in contact with Armstrong, and they said, that they might have sent a message to him back before the season started, but I don't think there's any regular chatter between him and most of the Virginia players. But
what do you think that relationship is like? Virginia, transferring is part of college football now.
Right.
But transferring to an in-conference team, a team that is on the schedule, I would imagine there's a smidge of bitterness right there, smidge of resentment there.
I would think so. All of a sudden, he goes from one of your closest teammates to a rival who's trying to beat you and vice versa. So some of these guys maybe feel a little betrayed in that aspect. It was interesting that he ended up at NC State. I know that for 2 years in a row he tested the NFL waters. He did not get really great feedback, and it was clear that he was not going to be drafted. He would have had to have gone as an undrafted free agent, and for a quarterback, that's not a healthy way to try to begin a professional career. But he looked around at some schools in different conferences, and nobody signed him. He ended up at NC State, back with his old offensive coordinator, Robert Anae, and he's not having the kind of year at State right now that he had here when they were last together in 2021, I guess it was, when he led the nation in passing for most of the season. And a lot of people felt like that was a product of the system, that once he had to switch systems to Tony Elliott's schemes last year, it didn't.
He struggled with the transition.
He struggled mightily, and there were times last year when even Virginia fans were scratching their head, wondering what was going on. He was missing wide open receivers,
yeah.
And some of the passes weren't even close. So, again, he's a good kid, great kid. It's just it just didn't work out here last year, and I think you could, in the locker rooms after, or not the locker rooms, but in the interview rooms after the games, you could clearly sense his frustration when you asked him about what was going on, and I think that frustration grew week after week. Some people blame him, some people blame the system, but we'll see. He's not having the kind of year he had a couple of years ago, and unless something changes, it doesn't look like that's going to happen this year either.
The line has moved, guys. It was 9.5 yesterday. The Wolfpack, a 9.5-point favorite yesterday around lunchtime. It's now down to 9 points. The over-under has also moved. 45.5 on Monday around lunchtime, now 46.5. This game on national television, 7:30 kickoff, ESPN. The Wolfpack 2-1 on the season, have yet to play a conference game. The Wahoos 0-3 on the season, have yet to play a conference game. And many in the Wahoo fan base are asking, is this potentially a bagel in the win column for Virginia football? I do want to highlight a fantastic event that's happening this Saturday, the 23rd, at Stablecraft Brewery at 6:30 p.m. It's their Fall Jams, live music by Savvy, a college football watch party with Virginia Tech and Marshall on the big screen. They encourage you guys to get your groove on at Stablecraft Brewery in Waynesboro. Just a fantastic locally owned brewery in Waynesboro. You know, Hootie, I think Anae and I think Armstrong and I think this NC State football team have a lot to prove. The pundits, especially at the national level, have looked at NC State's schedule. They've seen VMI, they've seen UConn, and they saw pretty much a shellacking against Notre Dame. They'll be one of the only games on the Friday docket, and they got the lights and attention of national television. I would not be surprised if NC State tries to run it up. I'm very curious to see what happens in the first half, the first quarter in particular, to see if either Musket or Calandria and this Virginia offense can keep the fireworks with what NC State is going to try to bring.
Well, that's going to be a real test early on to see if Virginia can hang with them. The last thing you want to do is
get behind.
Fall behind in a game like this, because you know NC State's going to come out firing. Virginia fans are very familiar with this offense because Robert Anae uses his quarterback not only to throw it but to run it a lot. So you're going to see Armstrong on the run, some design runs, some scramble runs, a lot. He's been doing that quite frequently so far in the first 3 games. I'm not sure that that's a great system in the long run against really good teams. It might work against lower level teams or mediocre teams, but I think against really good teams, it's a losing battle. I don't particularly like that offense. I found it interesting that Anae left here, went to Syracuse for a year, 1 season. They weren't all that great last year on offense. He ended up at NC State, who needed an offensive coordinator, and he completely changed their offense to his system. So it's no surprise that he brought in a guy like Armstrong who knows his system and has flourished in it in the past. But I don't know if I don't think NC State has enough overall talent to compete for the upper echelon in the conference this year. I saw them as a
mid-tier team,
a bowl team, but not somebody that's going to threaten the really top teams in the league. So it'll be interesting to see how they develop through the season in that offense. I just don't think against the really good teams that it's going to produce a lot of victories.
Bill McChesney watching the program, giving you some props. John Blair watching the program, giving you some props on LinkedIn, Twitter. Jump in the mix with some comments. We help a lot of viewers over on Twitter. We'll get to your comments here in a matter of moments. Glickman, we love you, Glick. Mark Glickman watching the show right now. He says, what kind of crowd do you anticipate on Friday night? Are season ticket sales up or down from last year to this year? Hootie's the expert here. I'm just a guy with a microphone who watches human behavior very closely. It seems to me that the fan base is right on this crossroads of engagement. And that crossroads, especially these next couple football games, is going to determine a lot of attendance, and it's going to determine the Boo Birds, and it's going to determine a lot of folks and their feelings on the head coach. Your thoughts on Glick's question and this crossroads the fan base is upon?
I believe that these season tickets were up a little bit going into the season. And of course, last home game was a special game with the tribute to the 3 tragically slain players, and of course JMU brought a lot of fans, over 50,000 fans in Scott Stadium. It was a great atmosphere. Hopefully a lot of those fans who were there enjoyed a really good football game and a really good atmosphere for college football. So maybe some of them will come back. Some people will come back to see Armstrong. Some will be back maybe to boo Armstrong. I don't know. But
I would hope the fan base appreciates what he's done.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, he gave his heart and soul to this program for a long time, and made that 1 year was special. I mean, even though they only finished 500, he gave people a lot of thrilling moments with his arm and his ability to run the football, and I'm sure that he'll try to do the same Friday night. But It's the first night game in Virginia in a couple of years. I don't think they had any night games a year ago. So sometimes that attracts more fans, particularly the student body. So I would expect it might be a healthy crowd, and we'll see. I don't know that NC State will bring a lot of people, but I'm guessing probably somewhere in the 30s to low 40s in terms of a crowd. And hopefully they won't all leave like they did. Of course, I'm not anticipating a storm delay, but hopefully they'll stick around for the whole game this time, especially if Virginia can take it into the fourth quarter again. And I think they probably could do that if they're able to move the football. If Musket can put some points on the board and move the football, they might be able to play with NC State. If he can't, then certainly Calandria has shown that he can. I would hope that they're able to make a game of it and at least take it to the fourth quarter and give themselves a chance to win. The thing they can't do against this NC State offense is fall behind early. If you do and you lose momentum and you make mistakes, it could be over at halftime or not even into the fourth quarter. So they've got to be very careful and try to establish some kind of a running game like they did. It got a little bit better at Maryland last week, and we'll see.
John Blair in Stanton's got a comment. We'll get to John Blair in a matter of moments. Maggie Gunnels, thank you for watching the program. James Watson, Tim Carson, Katie Pearl, Dr. Wolf, Dr. Downey, Bob Yarborough, Seth Batten, Dean Russell, Johnny Ornalis, Andre Xavier, Andy Zeman, Ray Cadell, Georgia Gilmer, Jeff Camrath, Jamie Turner, Michael Plecker, Matt Neese, thank you for watching the program. 4 states on the show right now. Why don't we get first a comment from Harrisonburg, Virginia. This is I'm inclined to agree with the commenter here who's watched on Facebook. Carter, I appreciate your comment. I believe this is the first one on the Jerry and Jerry show. The fact that Coach Elliott's even considering starting Musket over Calandria is a cause for concern. This football team is not going to win many games this year. Let's roll with the youth, especially at a position like quarterback that is extremely important for success. And why don't we figure out if Calandria is our starter for next year? I'm inclined to agree with Carter here. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I can see both sides of the story. Musket, I don't know, you could fairly judge him from the Tennessee game because he was facing a ferocious front seven that Virginia won't see anything like that the rest of the year. And the offensive line didn't protect him very well. He was running for his life most of the game, so we really didn't get a fair chance to see what he's truly like. We'll know a lot more this Friday night against NC State. I mean, who knows? He may be better than Calandria. He may come in and wow us. I don't know. He may lay an egg. But I think we got to give him a chance to show what he can do. And if he can't move the chains, if he can't put points on the board, then I think the clear move is to go with Calandria for the rest of the season and play for the future. So I totally agree with that concept. But I think you do have to give Musket a chance to see what he's all about, to see. I mean, this guy may come in and throw for 5 touchdowns. We don't know that. He may come in and completely implode. We don't know that either. But I think you have to see what he can do. And if he can't do it, then clearly the move is to go with the freshman and play for the future.
John Blair in Stanton's got this comment. This is a very specific one. We love JB on this program. He says, Hootie, he says, Jerry and Jerry, if it's 4th and goal at the 7 with 2 seconds left on the clock and you're down by 4, who do you want to be targeted? Malik Washington or Malachi Fields?
Wow.
Very specific question.
That's a good question. And I wouldn't go against either one of those guys because they both proved last week that they can deliver. But in that particular situation that he's talking about, I would throw it to Fields because he's a big, rangy guy who can get up and take the ball away from shorter defensive backs. You could throw the fade or something along those lines. So in that respect, I would throw it to Fields. But I wouldn't be totally opposed to throwing it to Washington either because he finds ways to get open and can make things happen.
There you go. Hootie Ratcliffe dropping dimes here. NC State, multiple people asking for a prediction from the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer. I'm seeing on 1, 2, 3, 5 commenters. This just came in from Keswick, Virginia. What's Ratcliffe's crystal ball in this game?
Well, clearly NC State's favored by, like you said, 9 points. Unless Virginia can shore up its defense and eliminate a lot of the mistakes they've been making. I mean, Virginia is ranking, Jerry, in the hundreds in so many categories on offense and defense. It's hard to beat anybody putting up those kind of numbers week after week. They've got to make some key corrections. They're making too many dumb decisions, shooting themselves in the foot with dumb penalties, special teams gaffes, not forcing turnovers, throwing interceptions. Just too many mistakes. They have to clean up a lot of issues before I think they can win. I think this team is trying to learn how to win, but I don't think it knows how to win yet. And the only way to do that is to eliminate mistakes and to finally beat somebody, anybody, and to get some confidence. And until they do that, I don't see how you can pick them to win a football game. So
So you got State. Does State cover the points?
Well, yeah, I would say probably so at this point.
Me too.
Unless Virginia cleans up a lot of the issues that it has. Yeah, I think NC State should cover the 9 points. If I were a betting man, I would bet that way. But NC State's going to come in here, like you said, wanting to prove a point that they can win. And I'm sure, has some revenge in mind. Armstrong wants to show people that he still can play because he left here with a disappointing year behind him, left behind. So they've got points to prove. I'm sure they're going to try to score as many points as they possibly can. I think, like you said, I agree with you. If Robert and I can put up 45 on you, he will.
Oh,
because
he put up 100.
I don't think he left here on very good terms, and has probably some sour feelings toward UVA. Maybe not the community or some of his former players, but about the program in general.
The divorce, a bitter divorce.
It was a bitter divorce. I know that he was highly disappointed in Bronco's decision to step away. Heard it was a very heated exchange at that meeting, mostly from him. There are nasty rumors from very good sources that he was so bitter about things that he was encouraging recruits not to come that had committed to here, actually signed, and a lot of them didn't. A lot of them went elsewhere. Some really good recruits who would be helping this football team right now, and had encouraged some other guys to transfer out, which they did. And I think once that became evident to the administration, I think he was asked to leave. He was one of the guys that was supposed to be trying to protect Virginia's interests after Bronco's decision. Instead, he was hurting the program. And so bitter divorce, I think, is an accurate description of what happened.
Virginia football has, like I said, the Wolfpack 7:30 ESPN Friday night under the lights here at Scott Stadium, then Boston College on the 30th of September. The Who's travel to Chestnut Hill then William & Mary in Charlottesville. A lot of the prognosticators in the beginning of the season were pointing to Boston College and William & Mary, that two-game stretch, as the victories that may occur on the 2023 season for this Virginia football team. Boston College showed a boatload of moxie against Florida State. And Virginia football is going to travel on the road. I'm going to ask you this question. I ask it for you every week. I think Vegas had the over-under, was it 3.5? Mm-hmm. 3.5 victories for Virginia football this year. Neither you nor I thought Virginia football was going to cover the 3.5 for total victories on the 2023 campaign. I think we're both now very much in that boat because I think we anticipated that potentially JMU was one of those victories. Do you see Boston College, William & Mary, NC State, this 3-game stretch, a win in this Little John?
Yeah, well, before we go there, it just popped into my mind that question a little while ago about the Virginia 4th and goal down on the
John Blair's question.
Yeah, John Blair's question. I do know one thing that you won't see called on 4th down.
Offensive line?
Maybe the worst call in my illustrious college football career.
Is this an O-line throwing a pass against Virginia Tech at Scott Stadium?
Yes. A tackle eligible play 16 yards from the line from the end zone by Robert and I. So I guarantee you won't see that play called come Friday or any other time. But anyway, getting back to your original question, it's going to be tough, man. I'm telling you. Boston College had a great chance to upset Florida State.
And Florida State's good.
And, yeah, Florida State's very good. In fact, the ACC regular season should probably be decided this Saturday at noon at Clemson when Florida State plays at Clemson. Winner of that game is going to have the inside seat, I think, on winning the regular season. And of course, the top 2 teams will, now that we don't have divisions, will play in the championship game. So it could be a rematch of those 2 teams. I don't know for sure. If Clemson loses, it may not be. That'll be 2 losses for Clemson. But, yeah, Boston College has traditionally played Florida State pretty well, particularly in Boston. And had it not been, I didn't get to see the game, but I think had it not been for a dumb penalty, they might have pulled off the upset. And Florida State ran out the clock to win the game. But it's going to be hard for Virginia to win at BC. It hasn't been an easy place for Virginia to win in the past. BC has struggled. Everyone was surprised that they were able to give Florida State a game like that. I don't know if Florida State took them lightly or what, but
31-29, Florida State blew almost a 21-point lead. They're the number 3 ranked team in the nation.
Yeah.
This game was played in Chestnut Hill. A 31-29 Florida State victory with Boston College banging out 13 fourth-quarter points.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because they lost their starting quarterback. He transferred to Pitt, I believe it was, so they've got a new kid in there at quarterback. But it's going to be tough to win a game on the road up there. Virginia hasn't been a very good road team. They did win at Georgia Tech last year mostly because Georgia Tech's starting quarterback got knocked out of the game early. But it's going to be tough. I'd say the odds of them winning are not very good. They might play a close game, but it's going to be awfully tough to pull off a win up there. Boston College is just as desperate as Virginia is, and they see that as a potential win for them. William & Mary is also that's not going to be easy. Mike London's team has, they were in the national semis last year.
And this is a big ball game for the Tribe.
They've got most of their players back from that team, and there's a lot of former Virginia players on that staff. Mike London, he'd like to come in here and win to show Virginia that they made a mistake by not keeping him around.
William & Mary right now is 3-0 on the season, unblemished.
I mean, Virginia might actually be favored in that game, believe it or not. But it's going to be awfully tough to win that game. It's probably going to be a knockdown drag-out, would be my guess. So it's going to be tough. And I think they play, Carolina in between, and they may get blown out at Carolina. Virginia never seems to play well down in Chapel Hill. Every once in a while they have pulled off a win, but
Boston College, William & Mary, North Carolina, Miami in that order.
Yeah.
North Carolina and Chapel Hill is exactly right. Saturday, October 21st. We'll watch this team very closely, Hootie Ratcliffe.
Yes, I mean it's a major rebuilding project. There's no question about it. The fact that last year when a lot of the guys transferred out and a lot of those really some of the better recruits in that class did not show up has taken a toll on the depth and the quality of the athlete in this program. There's just not enough guys to compete and pull off a win. Virginia has had that problem even in the good years in terms of having enough quality depth to. A friend of mine used to be a defensive coordinator at another ACC school, and he flat out said, Virginia's got some really good players. They've got guys that can play for anybody in the conference just about, but they don't have enough of them, and that's even more exaggerated now considering what happened in the transition from Bronco to Elliott, and even some of those guys left the program after last season. So some of your better players, they're all over the place. They're playing at Florida State, Missouri, Iowa, all over Nebraska. They're all over the place. So there's just not enough quality players in here right now, and I think that's one of the reasons he's trying to play these freshmen to try to build some depth to where they can maybe have a chance in the fourth quarter against some of these teams.
Hootie Ratcliffe, dropping dimes, guys. We're going to talk the ACC and the week that was, but we want to give the Wahoos a little bit glimmer of hope for this fan base. And I think for that glimmer of hope, we need to go to, I hate to say this, the hardwood. Let's talk recruiting and a 6'9" power forward that is looking like a very bright spot for Tony Bennett's bunch on the basketball court. Hootie, the show is yours.
Well, the Virginia fan base is extremely excited about Tony Bennett's basketball program, even though it didn't end well last year. And I think there were some reasons for that. They didn't have enough guys who I didn't think were shooters, good enough shooters, consistent enough shooters. And that kind of is what led to their downfall late in the season. They had trouble putting the ball in the basket. And there was a little dissension on the team. And that is no longer the case. They have virtually a brand new basketball team. They have a couple leftovers from last year and some really good leftovers, I might add. But the fact that they're having some great recruiting success. They got Christian Bliss, who was one of their top recruits for the 2024 class, although he reclassified and is now a member of this team, which I thought was a really smart move on his part because, he was ready to play college ball. What was another year in high school going to do for him?
6'4", 200-pound freshman from Queens, New York.
A really good point guard, tough kid. Not cocky, but very confident. He says, I win. Wherever I go, I win.
Which I love.
Yes, you love that. And he's going to come in here in red shirt and learn the system and practice with these guys for a year. He'll be ready to go next year when it's his time in the barrel. But the other day, yesterday, actually, or Sunday, they got a commitment from Jacob Cofie, 6'9", 225-pound power forward from Everett, Washington, to Seattle suburbs. Everybody in the Pac-12 was frothing at the mouth to sign this kid. They call him Little Jabbar out there on the West Coast. That might not be fair to the kid because we're talking about Jabbar. But I've watched a lot of video on this kid. He's not only can he score inside, he's a really good shot blocker. He can play stretch four. He can go out and hit the three or hit baseline jumpers. He's an extremely underrated passer. He's got great passing touch, and he's a tough kid. He can rebound. He can mix it up in the middle. So they're getting a face the basket forward who can score on just about any level, really, which is unusual for a 6'9" guy. He seems to be. I've talked to some people who saw him in person on his visit here a little over a week ago, and they said he looks a lot like Ryan Dunn and DeAndre Hunter. So we're talking about a big kid who has a lot of versatility, athletic skill, and can play both ends of the floor, something that Tony Bennett would call a complete player. So something to be very excited about. They beat out Southern Cal and Washington, his home state team, along with Ohio State, to get this kid. Oregon, UCLA, a lot of those other schools out west really wanted him. And the fact that Tony Bennett was able to get him was huge. I think he's building some great rosters for the future with Bliss and now Cofie. The key to all this is Con Canoopel, who visited here this past week and then finished up his official visits at Duke over the weekend. If they can get this kid, Jerry.
I mean, you're talking about top 5 recruiting class?
Oh, yeah, I think so. Because if they get those two, they'll probably get another one or two. And I see Final Four in the future, if not more than one, if they can get Canoopel in here, because this guy is lights out. He can shoot the eyes out of it. He's got a complete game. He's a winner. And he's going to help them attract even more talent. So the future looks so bright for Virginia basketball. It's unbelievable. And I know Tony Bennett is very excited about the team he has coming up this season, even though there's a lot of new players on the roster. This time around, he has shooters. He has a lot of guys that can fill it up. And I think that's something that won't betray them going down the home stretch this coming season. They might not win the ACC regular season like they did last year, but I think they'll be a deeper tournament team and a better overall team this year than they were last year.
Tony Bennett is a very persuasive guy, and he clearly knows how to connect with youngsters when it comes to persuading them to come to Charlottesville and to play for this Virginia men's basketball team. How do you characterize the recruiting moves he's made over the last handful of months? I mean, this looks like a class that can contend with any class that he's ever brought to Charlottesville, Virginia. And I'm talking a class that is synonymous with the Guy and Jerome class.
That 2016 class was incredible.
Which was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, this could number-wise, in terms of what these recruits are rated, all these guys are top 100. Some of them are top 10. The Cofie kid said that he considers it an honor to play for Tony Bennett. And one of the things that he pointed out in his decision to come here over those other programs was that he believes that Tony Bennett and his staff can develop him in his game so he can get to the next level. And that's what I keep hearing from a lot of these new players they're committing here, is that they believe that and they've seen it for a fact, how Tony Bennett and his staff develops these guys. They've got a lot of people in the NBA or in the CBA on two-way contracts hoping to get to the NBA. So these guys can see before their very eyes how Tony Bennett and his staff, Jason Wilford and some of these other guys, can help take their games to the next level. And Mike Curtis, who knows how to build an NBA body, he was a strength and conditioning coach in the NBA before he got here. So that's one of the common themes I'm hearing now is family atmosphere, the ability to play for Tony Bennett, the ability to develop their games for the next level. And we're seeing a lot of Wahoos on that next level, and that's just going to continue, I think.
It's fantastic. I mean, it's just snowballing for the positive here in Charlottesville. Tony Bennett, props to you. I mean, let's put the man's name on the court. I've been saying that for so long here. We need an Olympic sports roundup from you, Hootie Ratcliffe. We have a athletic department that legitimately is one of the best in the country, top to bottom. I know in the fall we get romanticized and or follow Virginia football very closely, but these fall sports have depth, they have talent, and they're posting wins.
Oh, naturally. Well, college football is the sport in America. I mean, they draw most of the ratings. It's the most popular sport. They fill up stadiums all around the country every Saturday. And so it's natural to have legions and legions of fans for that sport. But these other guys put in the work just like the football players do. And we have to salute George Gelnovich,
soccer
Jerry,
coach.
He won his 100th ACC game this past week with a 3-1 win over NC State. 100 wins at one school, 100 conference wins in the ACC has never been done before at one school. One guy, the Wake Forest guy, did it at Wake and somewhere else, Pitt or somewhere, but never at one school. So George Gelnovich, hats off to him for being here this long and putting together just an incredible soccer program over the last 20 years. I mean, he stepped in for Bruce Arena and has done a fabulous job ever since. They're 4-2-1 right now, and they play Notre Dame, number 10 Notre Dame, on the road on Friday. So wish them the best of luck. Steve Swanson also been here forever on the women's side, women's program. They're ranked number 20 in the country, and they're undefeated. They're 5-0-3 with 3 ties. They host number 2 North Carolina on Thursday at 7 o'clock. That's going to be a huge women's soccer game. North Carolina is considered the preeminent women's soccer program in the nation. Anson Dorrance, I think, is the guy that's been there for 47 years, won multiple national championships. They're ranked number 2 in the country. Would be a huge opportunity for Steve's team to knock these guys off, and wish him well. The field hockey team is number 6 in the country. They've dropped a couple of games in the past week to Boston College and to Maryland, number 5 Maryland. So they're 5-3. They're struggling a little bit right now. The volleyball team is doing well. Got to give kudos to the men's golf team, who's playing right now as we speak.
Yes, they are.
In the Highlands Invitational up in Illinois. They're ranked number 16 in the country. They've got all their players back from last year's team, which finished higher, I think, than any Virginia men's team ever has. Sophomores Brian Lee and Ben James, the 2 sensational sophomores they have, are tearing it up in this tournament, as I expect they will throughout the season. So keep your eyes on those guys.
Jerry Ratcliffe, guys, his namesake website, jerryratcliffe.com. Hootie, a lot for Wahoo fans to be thankful for, to rally around, to engage with. Soccer, golf, field hockey, basketball recruiting, a lot of success in this athletic department, undoubtedly. I know we follow this Virginia football team closely. Give us some closing thoughts on this NC State matchup Friday night, under the lights, national TV.
Well, it could be a fun game to watch if Virginia can play like they did the first half against Maryland and the first 3 quarters like they did against JMU. They could make a game of it, make it exciting. Curiosity-wise, I think people will be anxious to see if Musket can get the job done. If not, I think we'll see Calandria. It could be a barn burner. Who knows? If the defense could force some turnovers and help the offense out a little bit and stay out of the hole, they could make this an interesting football game. If they keep making the same mistakes that they did the last couple of weeks, then it may not be that close. It may not go into the fourth quarter. But if you're a Virginia fan, you gotta have hope that maybe they can take advantage of Armstrong, pick off a couple of his passes, turn them into points, move the football, make it a game into the fourth quarter, maybe pull off an upset. Who knows? It could be a rowdy crowd on Friday night.
Let's hope so.
We've seen Scott Stadium come alive before. It would be nice to see that again. So we could see a good football game. I'm not promising that, but there's a potential there for a really good football game.
JerryRatcliffe.com. What do you have on the editorial pipeline coming up?
Well, we'll be covering the heck out of game week as usual. We'll be at Tony Elliott's press conference today. We'll also be talking with Brennan Armstrong today on Zoom. So we'll have all the updates on that. We'll be following the Con Canoopal thing. His official visits are over now. He expects to make a decision soon, I think, on where he's going to go to school. If that could be blockbuster news for Virginia fans if he chooses Virginia. A lot of people think he's going to come here. So what an exciting time that would be if that happens. We'll be following some more basketball recruiting and everything else, and have a couple of podcasts in the can as well. So everything you want to know about Wahoos, tune in. We'll be there.
JerryRatcliffe.com, ladies and gentlemen, JerryRatcliffe.com. I'm on the website every single day. His namesake website, your source for Wahoo athletics, undoubtedly. Another show in the books, Hootie. We give props to Stablecraft Brewery for being a part of the show. Stablecraft Brewery, guys, is just a fantastic experience when it comes to craft beer, craft ciders. And it's a family environment. I've been there myself personally many times with my wife and our boys, and nothing better than having a nice cold craft beer with the better half and I, while our oldest is running around. Our youngest is still 10 months old, so he's very much in the stroller. Stablecraft Brewery.
I got to make it out there soon. That's
you do.
Sure.
You will love it. They have life-size Jenga out there. They have life-size beer pong out there with massive red Solo cups. It is just a fantastic experience. We'll give some props to Judah Wickower, our director and
our
producer.
Hero.
Yeah, absolutely, Judah Wickower. This show, guys, archived on ilovecville.com, archived on Hootie Ratcliffe's Twitter account, and anywhere you get your podcast or social media. The Jerry Show airs on Tuesdays at 10:15 a.m. on the I Love CVille Network. The I Love CVille Show, guys, is up in 1 hour and 7 minutes, and it's going to be red hot. Thank you kindly for joining us. Enjoy your Tuesday, and take care.
Thank you, sir. Well done to you as well.